The hospital corridor was unusually quiet that evening, but inside the emergency room, tension was building with every passing second. Family members stood frozen near the entrance, unable to fully process the terrifying situation unfolding before their eyes. Nurses moved quickly between rooms while doctors exchanged serious looks, creating an atmosphere filled with fear and uncertainty. The news had spread rapidly among relatives, and within minutes, worried faces filled the waiting area. Nobody expected the day to end this way. Only hours earlier, everything had seemed perfectly normal. Smiles, conversations, and ordinary family moments had suddenly transformed into panic, confusion, and heartbreak. The emotional scene became even more painful when one family member collapsed into tears after hearing the doctor's first update. Witnesses described the moment as absolutely devastating. Some relatives tried to remain calm for the younger members of the family, but the pressure became impossible to hide. The sound of crying echoed softly through the hallway, while phones continued ringing nonstop as distant relatives demanded updates. Several people were seen praying quietly in corners of the hospital, hoping for good news. Fear was written clearly across everyone's faces. Doctors reportedly worked continuously for several hours. Medical equipment noises filled the room while specialists rushed in and out carrying files and discussing urgent procedures. According to close family sources, the situation had become serious very quickly, leaving everyone shocked by how fast events changed. Nobody was emotionally prepared for what they were hearing. One relative later admitted that the family felt completely helpless during those terrifying moments. They could do nothing except wait and hope. As the night continued, emotional exhaustion began taking over. Some family members had not eaten or slept for hours. Their focus remained completely fixed on the hospital room where the patient was being treated. Friends and supporters slowly began arriving outside the hospital after hearing rumors online. Social media posts discussing the emotional situation spread rapidly, causing even more attention around the heartbreaking incident. Fans and followers expressed concern, flooding comment sections with prayers and emotional messages. Inside the hospital, the emotional pain became impossible to hide. One family member reportedly broke down while speaking with a doctor, desperately asking whether everything would be okay. Witnesses nearby described the moment as heartbreaking beyond words. Another relative sat silently for nearly an hour without speaking to anyone, staring blankly at the hospital floor. The stress and uncertainty had drained everyone emotionally. Even hospital staff appeared deeply affected by the emotional atmosphere surrounding the family. At one point during the evening, a doctor emerged from the emergency room with a serious expression, instantly causing panic among those waiting outside. Family members quickly stood up, surrounding the doctor and demanding information. For several seconds, silence filled the hallway before the doctor finally began explaining the situation carefully. Although the medical team was doing everything possible, the condition remained unstable. Hearing those words shattered the little hope some relatives were trying to hold on to. The emotional weight of the moment became too much for several people. Tears flowed openly as family members hugged each other tightly, attempting to offer comfort despite their own fear. One person reportedly repeated the same prayer over and over again while crying uncontrollably. Another relative tried contacting additional specialists for advice, refusing to give up hope no matter how difficult the situation appeared. The family's determination to stay strong for one another became one of the few things holding them together during the crisis. Outside the hospital, small groups of supporters gathered quietly. Some carried flowers while others simply stood silently, hoping for positive updates. Security staff attempted to maintain order as more people arrived after hearing emotional reports online. The growing attention surrounding the hospital added even more pressure to an already painful situation. Cameras and phones appeared outside the building as people searched desperately for information about what had happened. Meanwhile, inside the treatment room, doctors continued fighting to stabilize the patient. Medical staff reportedly refused to leave the room for long periods, focusing entirely on the emergency at hand. Several procedures were performed throughout the night while worried relatives waited anxiously nearby. Every small update caused emotional reactions among family members. Even minor changes in condition triggered waves of fear or temporary relief. The emotional roller coaster became unbearable. Hours later, exhaustion could be seen on everyone's faces. Some relatives leaned against hospital walls with red eyes from constant crying. Others sat quietly, unable to speak after the emotional trauma they had experienced throughout the night. The hospital environment itself seemed heavier, filled with sadness and uncertainty. Despite the fear, nobody wanted to leave. Every family member remained close, hoping they would soon hear better news. One emotional moment reportedly happened when a younger family member asked whether everything would return to normal again. The heartbreaking question reportedly caused several adults nearby to begin crying once more. Nobody knew how to answer. The uncertainty surrounding the situation had created emotional pain that words could barely describe. Some family members attempted to stay positive publicly, but privately many feared the worst. As midnight approached, another update finally arrived. Doctors explained that while the condition remained critical, there were small signs of improvement. Hearing this brought temporary relief to exhausted relatives. Tears of fear slowly turned into emotional tears of hope. Several family members hugged tightly after hearing the update, thanking doctors repeatedly for their efforts. Although the danger had not completely passed, the slight improvement gave everyone renewed strength to continue believing. Still, the emotional scars from the terrifying experience remained visible. Nobody inside that hospital would forget the fear, panic, and heartbreak they endured that night. The entire family had been pushed to their emotional limits, forced to confront the possibility of losing someone deeply important to them. Even after hearing slightly positive news, many remained cautious, afraid that the situation could change again without warning. Support messages continued pouring in from concerned followers online. Thousands of comments expressed prayers, love, and encouragement for the family during their painful ordeal. Many people admitted they were emotionally affected after hearing details about the hospital scene. The story had touched hearts everywhere because the fear of losing loved ones is something everyone understands. As dawn slowly approached outside the hospital windows, the family remained together, emotionally exhausted but still hopeful. They knew the coming hours would remain critical, yet they refused to leave each other's side. The terrifying hospital night had changed everyone emotionally, reminding them how quickly life can suddenly become fragile and uncertain. Morning sunlight slowly entered the hospital through the large glass windows, but the emotional darkness surrounding the family had not disappeared. Nobody had truly slept during the terrifying night. Some relatives remained seated in the same chairs for hours, holding cups of cold coffee they never drank. Others silently stared toward the intensive care unit doors, praying for another positive update. The emotional exhaustion had become visible on every face. Red eyes, trembling hands, and quiet tears revealed how deeply everyone had been affected by the crisis. Doctors continued monitoring the patient closely throughout the early morning hours. Nurses moved carefully through the hallways, speaking softly to avoid increasing the emotional tension already filling the hospital floor. Family members reacted nervously every time medical staff entered or exited the room. Even the smallest facial expression from a doctor caused immediate panic among relatives waiting nearby. The atmosphere remained heavy with fear, uncertainty, and emotional pain. One heartbreaking moment occurred when a close relative finally stepped outside the hospital to answer dozens of missed phone calls. The emotional pressure became overwhelming during the conversation. Witnesses described how the relative struggled to speak through tears while trying to reassure worried family members calling from different places. Every sentence carried pain and fear. The reality of the situation was becoming more difficult to hide with every passing hour. Meanwhile, social media attention surrounding the hospital incident continued growing rapidly. Rumors spread everywhere, with thousands of people discussing the emotional situation online. Some posts exaggerated details, creating even more stress for the already exhausted family. Supporters demanded answers while others shared emotional prayers and hopeful messages. The family reportedly became frustrated by false stories circulating online during such a sensitive time. They wanted privacy, but the public attention surrounding the heartbreaking event kept increasing. Inside the hospital room, doctors reportedly began a new phase of treatment designed to stabilize the patient further. Medical equipment sounds echoed constantly, while specialists continued analyzing test results and monitoring vital signs. According to hospital sources, the patient remained in fragile condition despite the slight improvement reported earlier. Family members held tightly onto every hopeful word from doctors, refusing to lose faith no matter how frightening the situation remained. As the hours passed, emotional conversations began taking place between relatives in the waiting area. Some discussed memories, sharing stories and emotional moments from happier times. Others openly admitted how terrified they had become during the night. One family member reportedly confessed that they had mentally prepared themselves for the worst after hearing the doctors speak earlier. The emotional honesty of those conversations caused several relatives to break down once again. At one point, a nurse reportedly invited two close family members into the room for a brief visit. The emotional scene inside was almost impossible to bear. Seeing their loved ones surrounded by medical equipment and machines caused immediate tears. Witnesses later described how one relative gently held the patient's hand while whispering emotional words of encouragement through tears. Another stood silently nearby, unable to fully control their emotions. The heartbreaking hospital moment deeply affected everyone involved. Outside the hospital building, supporters continued gathering throughout the morning. Some people carried signs with encouraging messages, while others simply stood quietly in solidarity. The emotional story had clearly touched many hearts. Several fans reportedly cried after hearing updates from family sources. News of the hospital situation continued spreading rapidly across different platforms, making the story one of the most discussed emotional topics online. Despite the overwhelming sadness, small moments of hope began appearing during the day. Doctors informed the family that certain medical signs were responding better than expected. Although the condition remained serious, the update offered emotional relief to exhausted relatives. Some family members hugged each other tightly after hearing the news, finally allowing themselves to breathe a little easier. Tears continued flowing, but this time mixed with cautious hope instead of total despair. Still, emotional tension remained extremely high. Nobody wanted to celebrate too early. Doctors warned the family that the next 24 hours would remain critical. Hearing this reminder brought fresh waves of anxiety. Relatives understood that recovery would not happen overnight. The emotional trauma from the previous night still haunted everyone inside the hospital corridors. One emotional incident reportedly happened when a child from the family asked to visit the patient. Adults nearby struggled to decide what to do. Some believed seeing their loved one might bring emotional strength, while others feared the hospital environment could become too traumatic for the child. After a long discussion, the family reportedly decided to allow only a very short visit. Witnesses described the moment as deeply emotional. Even hospital staff appeared moved by the heartbreaking interaction. Throughout the afternoon, doctors continued working tirelessly. Additional medical consultations reportedly took place as specialists reviewed treatment plans carefully. The seriousness of the situation remained undeniable. However, compared to the terrifying uncertainty of the previous night, the family finally felt a small sense of emotional stability beginning to return. They still feared bad news at any moment, but hope no longer felt completely impossible. As evening approached again, the hospital atmosphere remained tense, but calmer than before. Family members began encouraging each other to eat and rest briefly after nearly 24 hours of emotional exhaustion. Some relatives took turns sitting beside the patient while others stepped outside for fresh air. Even simple actions like walking through the hospital parking lot felt emotionally overwhelming after everything they had experienced. The emotional strength shown by the family during the crisis became something many people admired. Despite fear, exhaustion, and heartbreak, they continued supporting one another constantly. Nobody faced the painful situation alone. Relatives comforted each other during breakdowns, shared updates carefully, and remained united throughout the terrifying experience. Their emotional bond appeared stronger than ever during the darkest moments. Meanwhile, online supporters continued sending prayers and emotional messages from around the world. Many people shared personal experiences involving hospitals illness, and emotional family struggles. The heartbreaking situation had connected emotionally with countless individuals who understood the fear of seeing loved ones suffer. Some supporters even organized online prayer groups dedicated to the patient's recovery. Later that evening, another important medical update arrived. Doctors explained that while the patient was still in serious condition, certain dangerous complications had started decreasing slightly. Hearing this caused visible relief among several family members. One relative reportedly burst into tears immediately after hearing the update, overwhelmed by days of emotional stress finally releasing at once. Even with the encouraging signs, doctors remained careful not to give false hope too early. Recovery would still require time, patience, and constant medical supervision. The family understood this completely. They knew the emotional battle was far from over, but for the first time since arriving at the hospital, they finally felt genuine hope beginning to grow inside them again. As night returned once more, the hospital lights glowed softly through the dark windows outside. Family members remained together, emotionally exhausted yet determined to stay strong. The terrifying experience had already changed them deeply. Fear, sadness, love, and hope had all collided inside those hospital walls, creating emotional memories none of them would ever forget.